Hey guys, it's Crumb and welcome to part 5 of things only old RuneScape players will remember. In the last few videos, I've focused exclusively on things pre-2004, but there seems to be a lot of requests from people that played around the 2006 era. So for this video, I want to focus exclusively on events from around 2004 to 2006. So if you're one of the players that played back then, I really think you're going to enjoy this one. If you guys were in like a American or Canadian, perhaps a UK school system between like 2007 and like 2009, then you might actually remember this one from that experience. So it's the official RuneScape Handbook, and I actually have a copy sitting in my house right now that my brother bought when he was in elementary school from a Scholastic book fair. Now the original intent of this book was to help newcomers understand RuneScape a little better. But going through it now, some of the things that were actually written about the game are quite hilarious. Like they said bandits were 5'11", but only weighed up to 70 pounds. I'm sorry, but if that was the case, they would be dead. Along with including a dictionary to decipher the many acronyms and abbreviations that players apparently used commonly back then in RuneScape. Many of these I've never seen in my whole time playing RuneScape, so let me give you a few. Tube, which is apparently a high-level player who acts like a noob. PL8, which stands for plate body. Expo, which stands for crossbow. And NFS, which means not for sale. And the list goes on of this little game speak that was allegedly present in RuneScape back then. If anyone is interested in viewing the full contents of this book, I can't link it, but you can find it through a pretty easy Google search for RuneScape the official handbook. Definitely fun to look through, there's so many neat stuff in there. Including a teaser for Construction, which I find quite interesting because Construction was actually released at this time already, so they must have worked on that part before it was actually released and included it in there. Do you guys remember the days where you would boot up RuneScape and there would be Crunchy and Tim waiting for you to pick your graphics detail, whether it be high or low? I remember I always had to pick low detail, and let me know in the comments below what detail you guys went with. Now, this was a feature that was present between 2004 with the release of RuneScape 2 all the way up to 2008 with the release of the new high-definition system. And looking back on the specs required to actually run these different details really makes me appreciate how far computers have come. To run high detail back then, all you needed was 128 megabytes of RAM and a 500 megahertz processor. Today, my computer would crush that, but back then I couldn't even run that damn detail. I was stuck using low. In case you're wondering, the difference between high and low back then really wasn't all that much. It gave you some more musical effects, the textures were richer, and later on they added a few things like snow effects that were only present in high detail. But you really didn't miss out on too much if you couldn't run it. Now, if you want to dive even deeper into RuneScape history, there was actually a detail mode that was present in RuneScape Classic that not a lot of people knew about. And you can still experience it till this day. So if you boot up RuneScape Classic and press F1 in game, it'll actually suddenly make your screen much darker and it'll put bars across the whole game. And really back then, this was the only way that they could do any sort of low detail mode, and it was really necessary because many of the computers back then had no graphics card whatsoever. So some players back then, maybe you're one of them, let me know, had to play with those stupid bars and darkened screen. Nowadays, it's just an annoyance for anybody that comes new to RuneScape Classic and accidentally presses the key and they're wondering, what the hell happened. I wonder how many of you guys played before Hunter or Construction were ever released into RuneScape. So on the 21st of November 2006, Hunter was released, and it was a really big update at the time, but not the biggest update of the year, and it included 3 new areas, 2 new shops, and of course all the Hunter things that we know and love today. Another big one here is that before this time there was no such thing as Chinchampas in the game. Nowadays we know that if you want to train range you're going to be using chins. So definitely a really pinnacle update in RuneScape history. The same year, on the 31st of May, Construction was also released into the game, and Jagex called this in their official news post the biggest and most anticipated update. And this was really big for the time. In 2006, for an online game to feature a system where you can own your own house, customize it, build different things, was really huge. And we can see that they had plans for a type of system like this all the way back to the start of RuneScape Classic, but it took this long for them to actually get it into the game. And with the update came over 20 rooms, 330 pieces of furniture, 11 new NPCs, the list goes on. It was really a massive update to the game, And at the time, there was a lot of people that were having house parties, doing dungeon events, and generally having fun in the homes. It's not like today where everybody goes to the player-owned houses strictly for XP-related reasons or money-making reasons. They were actually going there to hang out and have fun, a much different world than we know today. And of course, around this same time, Duriel321 was the first to get 99 construction, and he had a massive house party which ended up revealing a big bug where players were still able to attack other players outside of the house, and thus the Falador massacre went down. A lot of people in the very first video in this series were upset that I didn't mention the magic shortbow and the whip nerf, so this one is for you guys. So on the 22nd of February of 2005, Jagex nerfed the magic shortbow as part of the Wilderness Capes and Changes update. And they did this to make it more balanced, because at the time, it would only consume 35% of your special attack when you used it to do that double shot, which was apparently very overpowered, especially in PvP. And they also ended up nerfing the Abyssal Whip, so kind of interesting, I actually didn't know this. When the Abyssal Whip first came out, the special attack had a 50% chance of hitting your max hit or hitting a 0. And this also was very overpowered, so they ended up changing this to a special attack that drained run energy. I personally don't know a lot about how the community felt at this time about those updates. I didn't really play around that time, so if any of you guys played then, please let me know what the community had to say about those updates. You know, I wonder if it affected the price of the whip at all, I wonder how it affected PvP, and so on. People that played before 2006, especially you, that one person, I know you're out there, that had 99s back then, will remember that there was no skill capes in RuneScape. So you can imagine being a player that spent all that time to get a 99, and it took so much longer back then, and then having no way to actually show that off to other players. Nobody really knew that you had that level, unless they went on the high scores, but who the hell does that? So really, skill capes were a response to these high-level players complaining and nagging on the forums that they wanted a way for them to flaunt their achievement in the game. And so after some eluding made by Jagex, they finally released the skill capes on the 18th of October of 2006. And with that, they made them members only, which at the time caused a lot of controversy, because there was some free-to-play players that put a lot of time in the game to get max stats, and hey, you know what, they couldn't show it off because they weren't members. Nobody really makes that complaint anymore because it's just been so ingrained in the game for so long that skill capes are members. And one interesting thing I think to note here is that actually the original version of RuneScape that was petitioned for old school RS was the version from 2006 pre-skill cape update. So it's interesting to think that had Jagex had a backup from back then old school RuneScape today wouldn't actually have skill capes in it, unless they added them of course after, which I'm sure they would have by now. But of course they could only find a backup from 2007, so the game started off having skill capes. To the same accord, the max cape wasn't released for the first time on RuneScape 3 until 2011. So anybody that had a maxed account between 2006 and 2011 or even prior had no way of showing it off. And then, of course, on 2015, we saw the release of the max cape into old school RuneScape, and we're still waiting on some sort of completionist cape. You know, one of the reasons, actually, I just kind of want to throw this in here, that Jagex waited so long to put the max cape into old school RuneScape is simply because there wasn't a lot of max players. There's an old live stream that they did when this question was proposed for one of the first times, and they gave the reason that, well, hey, who's going to get the max cape? It's only going to be Jebrim because he's the only guy maxed right now. So what's the point of spending the time right now? Let's wait a year or so and then do it. A lot of people have commented saying that I haven't mentioned this one yet, so I'm going to dedicate the time to do it now. Originally in RuneScape, for 7 years there was no bank tabs whatsoever. When you opened up the bank, it was like one big page of items, and if you took something out, everything got shifted to the left. It was frankly a mess. Or even worse, in the RuneScape Classic days, they had this like page system, and it would show the items in your inventory and the items in your bank at the exact same time. Really, really unintuitive to use. But on the 14th of July of 2008, they finally added bank tabs, which really sparked the beginning of a lot of bank improvements that were added from that time forth. You know, we saw this in the release of Old School RuneScape. Originally, there was no bank tabs in the game because, of course, they used a version of the game from 2007. But luckily enough for us, we have the God Mod Ash, who spent a lot of time programming the bank in Old School and made it significantly more user-friendly for us. So really, we owe a big thank you to him. I remember back then, even before the addition of things like withdraw all but one, it was just a huge pain in the ass to take things out. Or the withdraw X and deposit X options, they used to never save the amount you put in. So nowadays, if you like withdraw 14 items and you right click on the item again, it says withdraw 14. That used to never happen. I remember stringing stupid bows on the release of old school RuneScape, and it was just miserable. Every time I want to take out 14, I'd have to manually type it in, and I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. And that is all the time we have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the era that I chose to focus on for this one. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, we're coming up really fast on 6,000 subscribers. It's a little scary how fast my channel has been growing over the last 2 weeks. But thank you guys all very much. I hope you've really been enjoying the content. And until next time guys, love, peace, and chicken grease.